Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and we have a pattern release today and it's a good one. I cannot wait to share. We're going to be talking about the details of the Vikos, the newest Itch to Stitch pattern. I'm going to be showing you some close-ups of some of the design details because I did use a stripe on this for this version. Suitable fabrics, what fabrics to choose, maybe a couple of things that I would change for my next version, and suitability for whatever your skill level might be. Okay, so we're going to be talking all about that, this newest Vikos pattern from Itch to Stitch. Okay, folks. So I'm part of the tester group for Itch to Stitch. I don't do a ton of pattern testing anymore. Really, it's just Love Notions and Itch to Stitch for the most part. Of actual pattern testing. I do get access early to some other pattern companies to make things up beforehand, but when it comes to actual testing, those are kind of the only two I do, just because time. I just only have, I have a finite amount of time, so being able to choose. So I'm usually pretty picky about, number one, if I have time. Sometimes there'll be a pattern that pops up that I absolutely love and I just don't have time to test, and I hate when that happens. But the past couple of Itch to Stitch patterns, I have actually made time in order to make. So her last one that she released not that long ago was the Akari Trench. I absolutely created time in the day in order to be able to make that trench coat. We're now getting into where I can actually wear, it's warm enough that I can actually wear this trench coat out. Absolutely loving it. And when I saw the line drawings for this one, so we went from a very complicated pattern that has just, not complicated, just a lot of steps, a lot of pieces, a lot going on that trench coat, to this pattern that is very much, I would call it beginner/beginner plus. I'm not sure what she ended up classifying it on the website, but now that I've sewn it up, if you have, done basic garment construction, you can absolutely make this dress. And if you're someone that has been sewing for a while, this dress is going to make up, or top, it's either, is going to make up in no time at all. And it is like the perfect silhouette for spring and summer, especially as a dress. I feel like it speaks very spring to me as a silhouette. So let's talk a little bit about it. So again, this is the Vikos dress and top. So there's a top version and a dress version. It features this really pretty split neckline that is faced. You probably can't tell. It's a faced neckline, but then you top stitch it down, which keeps everything nice and neat and in place. So it almost gives like a tunic kind of vibe. In my opinion. And it also has optional inseam pockets if you would like a good inseam pocket, which I did use, and I actually top stitched my pockets down. Again, I'll show you here in just a second up close of what this dress looks like. And I've seen that on dresses before, and because I had the top stitched on the facing and my hems on my sleeves and the bottom of the dress are top stitched hems, I decided I'm going to go ahead and just top stitch those pockets in place. Then it keeps them in place and they're not, moving around all, getting all floppy in there. So I hate with inseam pockets on a dress that doesn't have a waist seam when they get flipped to the back and then it gives you weird puckering at the hips. But when you top stitch them down like this, they stay flat and it doesn't give you that added width to the hips, but still gives you a pocket. So best of both worlds in my opinion. But those are optional. You don't have to use them. It features a bust dart. It comes in her full size range from a 0 up to a size 32, I think. I'll list the bust and hip measurements range here, but also cup sizes. So she goes from an A cup size to a double D cup size. I have made the size 8 with a D cup. That is the size I make an Itch to Stitch, and it fits me pretty much spot on all of the time. She also always includes a few different spots of lengthen and shorten lines so that you are lengthening or shortening across the whole pattern and not just in one spot, which I really appreciate on her patterns. And then there are 3 different sleeve options. There's a short sleeve option. There is a sleeve option with a fold over with a tab that, a little tab that folds up so you can roll your sleeve up a little bit, or a split cuff to 3/4 length option that's got like a split there in that little cuff piece. Just a lot of really great options. There's not back darts, but there is a beautiful center back seam here that does give shaping through the back, which I appreciate. And I would say the skirt has a little bit of an A-line flare, like an A-line line to it. which I also really enjoy. So the only alterations that I made to this pattern were to shorten it 1 inch at each of the lengthening and shortening lines. I always shorten 1 inch at the waist, so to bring that waist up to my waist, because I have a very high waist, for short torso, high waist. So I always, in fact, a lot of patterns, I go ahead and shorten that 1 inch at the waist, but I always shorten hers at the waist, and she always has a lengthen and shorten line right about there. And then I shortened it 1 inch at the, it's below the hip line, like in the dress part. So if I were making the top, I would have just shortened it the inch and been good. But with her dresses, I usually do 2 inches. So 1 at the waist and 1 at the lower lengthen and shorten line. And so I've shortened it 2 inches. That being said, I think and I'll probably go back, well, maybe not on this one, but I think I will shorten it at least another 1.5 inches just for my personal preference. I wanted to leave it as is because I always shorten her patterns 2 inches. So this is what it looks like as intended. So if you don't ever shorten or lengthen things, this is about where it will hit on your body as well. Just to give you a frame of reference. Now, for my own personal preference, I think I do want it just a little bit shorter. Now, I'm not wanting a mini dress, but I do think I want it maybe 2 inches above my knee. So probably raise this up maybe another 1.5 inches or so, and it's going to be absolutely perfect. And that's just for my personal preference. I am very impressed with the inseam pockets and top stitching those down. All I did was at the very end, I pressed those pockets towards the front. So I followed all the instructions. I understitched my pockets, sewed them together there in the side seam. But then once everything was sewn down, I made sure that my pockets were laying nice and flat to the front. Gave them all a good press, stuck my ham in there so I wasn't accidentally pinning the back layer to it, and just pinned the pockets in place. And then from the top, because I could feel the surged edge of that pocket bag, so I'm not sewing on the pocket bag, I'm actually sewing on the seam allowance of the pocket bag. I just went through and top stitched that down, and that's all I did. It's just, I mean, there are definitely dresses that I wouldn't want to do this on, but for this style of dress, I just felt like it really worked. And I am very pleased with how it worked. Okay, let's talk fabric here for a second. I used a blue and white, obviously, striped cotton shirting from my stash. So the recommended fabrics for this pattern are light to medium woven fabrics. And she suggests both fabrics with drape and a little bit more structured. So we're talking like rayon linen blends that just have a little bit more drape. You could use a rayon challis. I feel like for the dress, a rayon challis might have a little bit too much drape, but it would be beautiful as the top. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it could easily, as the dress, be, look a little, not dumpy, but, you know, like just not as structured and showing your shape where you go in and all that kind of stuff as much. Hopefully that makes sense. But I think a rayon challis would be absolutely beautiful in the top. Now she has made one of the versions in a linen rayon blend. I think that's lovely. I think if you want a little bit of drape, so a blend is absolutely, or like a rayon cotton blend, that would absolutely be beautiful for the dress and for the top. You can also use just straight linen. You can use cotton shirting, cotton poplin, cotton broadcloth. Probably a cotton lawn if you're doing maybe for the dress too, but I think definitely for the top, you could get away with a cotton lawn as well. So those are kind of all of the different kind of fabrics that you may want to think about using. There is no closure on this. This pulls on over your head and it just feels very Southern summer to me, very preppy summer time to me, which is why I love it in this stripe. That being said, Jenny also loves this in the stripe. And while we are similar, we are almost the same size, which I always find interesting with measurements, that we are built very differently. Our full bust measurements are not, mine is much larger than hers, but our upper bust measurements are very similar. Our waist and hip measurements are very similar, but it is proportioned differently on our bodies, which I think is just so fascinating when it comes to translating measurements into actual bodies. And obviously she is much taller than I am, so where I've had to shorten things, she would want to probably lengthen things. Not that big of a deal on a dress like this because it's a little bit less form-fitting, but she loves this dress. So, and these are really more her colors than they are mine. So I may let this go home with her to wear this summer. But for the tabs here, so it calls for a button, but I just did a snap. a little gold snap, just because I thought it was cute and it gave a little metallic sheen there at the sleeve. Something to keep in mind, if you, no matter what fabric you are using, if it's something that has an obvious right and wrong side, you can see the wrong side of the fabric if you do this sleeve version. So the other two sleeve versions, not an issue, but if you're doing this sleeve version, you can see the wrong side of the fabric. So you may just want to take that into consideration if you wanted to do this sleeve and your fabric does have an obvious right and wrong side to it. So yeah, just something to kind of consider when you're picking your pattern or which version you want to make for this pattern. Again, I would call this, I mean, I feel like if you have done any kind of sewing, Jenny is just new back to garment sewing. She absolutely could have tackled this no problem whatsoever. In my introduction to garment sewing class that I sell on our website, I walk you through how to do a top, and it's the Cadence by Love Notions. This is just as easy as that. You absolutely could use this pattern instead for that class, really with the same results. Anyway, I would definitely call this a very beginner-friendly pattern. Another thing to keep in mind, because this doesn't have a waist seam, in fact, it's got very few seams. It's just got your side seam, there is a bust dart, but everything is there's just not that many seams. This would be beautiful with a large scale print. Something that you wouldn't want to try and pattern match, but you wouldn't have to if you didn't want to, because it would just be a beautiful canvas for that. And if you wanted to make this more tunicky looking, what you could do, and this is actually also a section in my introduction to garment sewing class, is sew the facing on the outside as opposed to the inside. So I would, and I think in the introduction to garment sewing, it's when you get into the dress, I show how to finish off the facing on the inside of the dress as well as on the outside of the dress. But when you are interfacing your facing, you do the, like the clean finish for interfacing. Basically what it is you cut out your facing, you cut out your interfacing, you sew them together at the shoulder seams, don't fuse them, and then you put your interfacing on top of the facing. So the non-sticky side of the facing against the right side of the facing. So all the way around the edge, clip into your edges, yada, 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 understitch where you can, and then flip that interfacing to the wrong side and then fuse it so that it finishes off the edge of the facing really cleanly. I think I've shown that on the channel before. It's a really simple technique. Again, it is in my introduction to garment sewing class in the dress module. But finishing off that way, then it makes it really easy to sew the facing right side to wrong side and then flipping the facing to the right side of the garment. And then you can have a lot of fun with maybe some embroidery if you want to do embroidery on the facing, or just a contrast, a different fabric. I feel like there's a lot of options there. So just something to take into consideration on ways that you could, if you are a more advanced sewist, maybe some ways that you could take this pattern and make it look completely different just by changing up a few of the design details. If you have watched any of my videos recently, I'm very much on the embroidery train right now. Yeah, and I really want to recreate a lot of things. I may use this dress pattern actually. If you watched last Tuesday, my ready-to-wear outfits where I paired patterns and fabric, there was a eyelet fabric that was like a tunic type dress, and it had like a top collar on it, which I absolutely could just put like a high collar into this neckline here. But then it V'd just like this, and it was a tunic style. But I have that aqua eyelet that's the same fabric that I paired with that look in that video, just a different color. And I may use that and recreate that dress, that look with this pattern, because I've already got the pattern, and I really like how this looks. And if Jenny takes this one, I'm going to have to make one for myself too. I also have that linen, that poppy colored linen that I bought, that would also be a really good dress or top. I want to make the top version too. I feel like that could be really, really good for spring, as with maybe some fun fabric. And I know I've got stuff in my stash, maybe a silk even. Yeah, I think the top would be excellent in a really drapey fabric. So I have the pattern obviously printed out for this test, and I can't wait to play around with it. So the Vikos is on release sale right now, meaning oh, I'm not entirely sure the percentage, but here for the first week, so through probably next Monday is my guess, that will be on release sale. So if this is a pattern that you would like to add to your catalog, I just really feel the potential for this one is vast. And I have a feeling you're going to see a few different iterations of this popping up on my feed. So now is a great time to grab it. But that is it for today's video. This is the newest Stitch to Stitch pattern. Her drafting and instructions are always top notch. So give this one a try, whether you are a beginner seamstress or been sewing for years and years and years. This is a great one to add to your catalog. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. I hope you get some sewing in today and the rest of this week, and I will see you guys again next time. Have a good one. Happy sewing.